Although the American military has no feet on the ground in Libya, journalists, many of them Americans, have flocked to the country in order to cover the emerging story, putting themselves at unpredictable risk in the conflict zone. Such a chaotic battleground calls for journalists to undergo similarly chaotic training.
The title of the course was, personal safety and security in the field. So there's a girl next to me covered in blood, and there's a lot of people running towards the car, shouting, waving AKs in the air and firing as well. So we all got dragged out, and that became a very real point.
Although the situations conflict journalists work in are nearly impossible to prepare for, many media organizations require their journalists to attend hostile environment training courses in an attempt to anticipate the danger of reporting from the front line. In these training courses, journalists learn how to communicate effectively in chaos, practice emergency first aid, and experience dangerous situations similar to combat. The ultimate goal is to make conflict journalists as ready as possible to face the real thing.
All these people came out with AK-47s and dressed in combat gear, and the lady that was driving the actual van, she hit the brakes really hard because she was worried that something was going to happen, and she saw the guns and she automatically hit the brakes, emergency stop. And another girl that was in the back, she flew forward straight into the into the actual dashboard and cut her face open, and so there was blood all down her face and stuff, and everyone was kind of looking at her covered in blood and thinking, this isn't fake anymore. This is kind of this is very, very real.
That is Stephen Sidlow, the head publisher of London-based news site Demontics.com, describing his experiences in such a course. These simulations may seem extreme, but they are similar to what conflict journalists experience. Even though there are no international troops on the ground in Libya, there are still journalists' lives at stake. Mohammed Abdel Daim from the Committee to Protect Journalists talks about this danger.
We at the Committee to Protect Journalists have tracked nearly 100 press freedom violations in the country since February 17th. The total number is probably higher. We have been able to independently verify 50 detentions, 5 fatalities, and scores of confiscations, cases of obstruction, the jamming of satellite transmissions, the cutting off of internet, and more. Attacks on media facilities, destruction of equipment, expulsion. So it really spans the gamut here.
Currently, there are even 16 journalists who have been detained and are in Libyan custody, or at least are believed to be in Libyan custody. Daim concedes that some may have been killed, maybe in hiding, or have otherwise disappeared.
But again, there is overwhelming amounts of circumstantial evidence that those people are in government custody. Let me give you one example. For instance, there are 3 local Libyan journalists who disappeared under mysterious circumstances within 2 hours or less of having spoken critically about the government on Al Jazeera. Where'd they go? They didn't go fishing.
In addition, the Libyan government has even deceived the international community about which journalists it is actually holding.
They've also said in the case of at least one journalist that, we have this guy, he's fine, he's in good health, he'll be allowed to talk to his family soon, and they did this for 46 days, and then it was uncovered that the guy had been shot in the desert and killed 46 days earlier. They strung his family and his government and his friends and his colleagues along for 46 days.
The journalist was South African photographer Anton Hammerl. He was reporting from the front line with fellow journalists James Foley, Claire Gillis, and Manu Bravo. When a truck full of Libyan soldiers appeared on the horizon, Hammerl was shot and Foley, Gillis, and Bravo were captured. While Foley, Gillis, and Bravo were imprisoned, Hammerl was left behind, bleeding to death in the desert. Many private security firms attempt to replicate these situations in hostile environment training courses. Courses attempt to teach journalists like Hammerl, Foley, Gillis, and Bravo the proper reaction to dangerous situations, such as a combatant truck appearing on the horizon. These courses are taught by a variety of security consulting firms, including Centurion Risk Assessment Services, AKE Limited, and Red R UK. The fact that many of the instructors at these companies are ex-British Special Forces adds to the intensity of the training. David Swanson, a photojournalist for the Philadelphia Inquirer who took a hostile environment training course with Centurion Services before he left for Iraq, recalls this intensity. He spoke with me about some of the weapons lessons in his course.
One afternoon they walked us through a field, and there were different markers, different lengths away from us, maybe 100 feet away. They said, you could be killed by an RPG from this distance. Maybe a couple of 100 yards further than that, mortar fire, you were within the lethal range. We continued walking, came upon an open field, and said, where would you think a sniper would be here? And we were all making our best guesses, and it turned out he was probably 20 feet away in the grass right in front of us.
While these weapons lessons were useful, Swanson also learned many first aid tools that would undoubtedly be critical if he or one of his colleagues were to be injured in the field.
Some of the basic first aid will stick with me, that the body needs to breathe, needs to circulate its blood, and needs to get oxygen to the brain, and it's basically, pressure on the wound until you can get better help.
The courses also attempt to replicate the speed with which events can change in conflict zones. According to Swanson, the course instructors simulated this by adding an element of surprise to the training.
We would take a bus from our hotel to the area where we were practicing and having our lessons, and a car pulled up in front of us and a car behind us. They threw a flash grenade, entered the bus through the front and the back.
After having tied the journalist's hands, the intruders went through pockets, taking wallets, watches, and even wedding rings.
And it was just a good lesson, and what you have on you is what you have on you, you might lose. But if we were being kidnapped or attacked by hooded people, that was a good sign, because they probably would let us free or they'd hold us for ransom. If they were unhooded or not have a mask on, the chance of being killed was greater because they didn't care that we could describe what they looked like.
Simulations of hazardous situations are important, but proper communication could keep journalists out of these positions in the first place. Daim says that information is the true key to preparation.
When we are contacted by a journalist or a media organization, be it a newspaper, a TV station, a radio station, an online publication, or anything else, we offer our assistance. We tell them the situation on the ground as we reported. We tell them what we've heard from other journalists who were there or who continue to be there. We give them the latest, the most accurate, the latest information we can provide. The information is timely and it has a limited shelf life.
The problem is that situations in conflict zones can change so fast. In Libya, for example, the front line can be one town at a certain point, but then a week later, it could have shifted 100 miles east or west. Swanson remembers how quickly war zones can change from the time he spent reporting from Iraq.
When I first got to Baghdad, we could walk around and go to restaurants. And then the 4 bodies were hung on the bridge, and that all ended. And we were riding around in the dirtiest cars we could find and dressing in Pia over our head and around our face, trying to blend in. It's all such a liquid situation.
Regardless of any communications lessons they learn, or any preparations they may receive, journalists who cover conflict must still accept the risks of their profession. Swanson says that this may have been the most important underlying message of his course.
They talked about taking calculated risks. You're going over there, a lot of people are backing you, a lot of money is being spent. You're there to do a job, and sometimes you have to do things you don't want to do, but you take calculated risks.
Daim agreed, adding that no matter how well hostile environment courses may prepare journalists for places like Libya, there is just no way to circumvent the danger of war.
There are a lot of risks involved with this kind of reporting, and the idea is that you consider all the factors and you make the best and most well-informed decision. It is a high-risk activity by definition. So, there is no ways to prepare in order to make it risk-free. The way to make it risk-free is not to go.
Next week, we plan to talk with a leading journalist who survived the perils of his recent trip to Libya, but lost close friends and colleagues. For War News Radio, I'm Stuart Russell.